Well, I actually think we have value for customers regardless if they have huge data lakes or not. And the reason is, in most of the customers we talk to are, enterprise customers. And if you're an enterprise customer, I guarantee you have more than one database. You have more than one vendor of database, right? You've got Microsoft SQL, Oracle, DB2, etc. And so by virtue, you have data that's already fragmented and fractured. And when data is already fragmented and fractured, you now have a challenge in actually locating the data, finding the data, knowing who has access to the data, let alone understanding what it could be used for. So the challenge that a lot of companies have is not so much in querying the data. There's a lot of advancements with flash, with memory, etc., and clustering to actually make that fast. The problem is, if you don't know what it is that you're looking for and how the data should be treated, it doesn't matter how fast the processing is. So let me give you an example, right? So suppose there's some data that is sensitive, maybe it's related to something like GDPR or PII, or, let's say you're a pharmaceutical company and it's data related to a type of clinical trial. What I've just talked about are all things that have context, and based on that, you should either mask it, encrypt it, delete it, move it somewhere else, or you should give it to someone else to analyze, or you should treat it differently in terms of handling it. So there's all these, I would say, follow-on actions that people need to take based upon the context of the data. Now, this is hard regardless if you have a big data lake or not, because if you look at even the relational databases, in most organizations, it's not hard to find someone with, a large number of tables, right, in an order of magnitude of maybe 100,000 or more. It's not hard for each table to have 10 fields. But pretty soon you're at, a million or so things that someone has to manually look at to figure out what it is. This is where it becomes humanly impossible. Now, of course, yes, it gets harder when you have a data lake, because not only the volume, but sometimes the data there is actually devoid of structure. So you have an even harder time when there's no headers to actually figure out what the data actually is. Now, we don't stop there. I think what makes us more powerful is, just because I can tell you what 20 million fields means, doesn't mean you know what to do with it. Doesn't mean, like I told you, whether things are useful or not useful, things are potentially harmful or not harmful. It's that next level of distillation where you can take data and you can abstract it to a level that is actually understandable for human beings. So for example, if I showed you a field that says customer name, another field that says address, it's okay, but if I told you that those two components are part of an object known as purchase order, all of a sudden purchase order has a very different connotation than just two fields, right? One known as customer name, one known as address, and how you would treat information known as purchase order is very, very different. So that's an example of kind of what we're talking about with Promethium. And today, that process of distillation or abstraction, meaning from data, is actually all done manually. It literally takes a human being to go and figure out, okay, what does this mean? And like I said, we're at a point now where with heterogeneous databases, data lakes, data marts, etc., and the volume of data that we have, it's really not feasible for you to do that in a way that's going to give you the results you need in a timely manner. And to make it to add one more ingredient to the perfect storm, you later on something like a GDPR government regulation where there's potentially a hefty fine, a minimum 20 million euros or 4% annual revenues, when someone's not able to find the relevant data or show that they're treating the data properly, to get consent, to remove personal information, to retrieve data requested by a customer. It becomes a very serious problem now, where it's no longer a luxury to have data governance alongside analytics. I think people are now demanding that any type of analytics they do has an aspect of governance associated with it.